Everybody to our...
Hold on 1 second there. Here we go, everybody. We are now live. Trenton, this is all yours.
Thank you, Mark. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. We'll do some quick introductions. Before we do that, though, I want to start off by saying the goal of this webinar is really to reach out to school and district leaders. We know right now is an unbelievably difficult time on so many different levels. And as we're thinking about you out there in your schools and in your districts, trying to support teachers and students and parents, we want to take an opportunity to share with you some of the things that we've been doing in conjunction with the Instructure Center for Leadership and Learning. Some of the things that we have over the last year actually been working on to support remote learning or learning from home. I don't want to necessarily say virtual learning, because I know a lot of people out there are somewhere on this spectrum of utilizing Canvas as an online resource, which is incredible. But we also know there are a lot of folks who are just trying to get resources to students at their homes the best way they can. And so what we've done is we brought together 3 world-class school and district leaders to talk about specifically, we're going to talk about the Fundamental 5, which is really a framework for online learning or learning from home. I'm Trenton Goebel. I am the founder of Mastery Connect. We were acquired by Instructure a year ago, almost to the day. And I'm currently the Vice President of K-12 Strategy at Instructure. So we also have with us Dr. Dean Wilson, Todd Theobald, and Cheryl Johnson. Dean, tell us a little bit about yourself, then we'll go to Todd and Cheryl.
You bet. From Roosevelt, Utah. It's a very remote place, just in eastern Utah. I've been a middle school principal, a high school principal. I've worked as an assistant superintendent of schools, and I'm currently the vice president of student services for Uintah Basin Technical College. So excited to be on the call, and excited to learn with you today.
So I'm Todd Theobald. I'm coming to you live from Salt Lake City. Most of my experience has been in elementary and district level leadership. I was a national distinguished principal, and my work with schools and districts across the country now really focuses on creating quality assessments that really drive instruction based on successful collaboration and focus on standards, breaking those down and helping set out those learning progressions so that we can pinpoint learning and walk kids through that process. So excited to be here.
And also the Utah Principal of the Year a couple years ago.
Thanks for having that.
Yeah. Cheryl.
I'm Cheryl Johnson, and I come to you from Craig, Nebraska, which is possibly more remote than Roosevelt, Utah. I am a past math teacher, 7-12 math teacher for several years, and I moved into a consortium digital learning space where I promote digital learning in all of our school districts. I am called the Canvas enthusiast in Nebraska, and so I support 14 of our school districts in Canvas. Also do a lot of blended coaching as well.
So not just an enthusiast, but a full-on expert in Canvas. Which I think is, for a lot of you who are using Canvas, right now you're probably trying to figure out how do we best utilize this resource, make it meaningful for our students at home, supporting parents, in their efforts to try to support their kids. I should mention, I started my career as a teacher. I was also a school principal, a district level administrator. And one of the things that we have done a lot of at Instructure is we've done a lot of support work for helping teachers really utilize this tool. There's been a lot of quick learning going on out there. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we really want to highlight here is, while all of that is really important, we think, and we've always said that leadership is hands down the most important thing that takes place in a school, in terms of the saying that we always use is, behind every great school, you'll find a highly successful leader. Right, that is so key. And so as we've thought about this, I ended up doing a lot of calls with administrators all over the country to say, what are you doing? And I honestly, when I first started calling, I expected to hear a lot of people say, we're using Canvas in this way or that way. But what I found was, it's so varied out there. I had a principal say to me the other day, I have 30 languages spoken in my school. And right now, we're just trying to communicate and support our students and parents the best way they can. And we're doing a packet pickup every 2 weeks. All the parents line up, and we've got packets that our teachers have put together, and we're handing those out. but we're not really keen on getting them back, And so that was really humbling for me to realize, it's not a one-to-one world out there, and not every student has access to the internet. And so in this time of kind of rethinking how we're providing support for students at home, we have to rethink our methods and our framework. And so I want to introduce quickly the framework that we use in the Leadership Institute, for the Canvas Leadership Institute, for supporting students at home. And this doesn't mean that you have to have, technology. It just means we need a framework. And so the way we broke this down was we started looking at what stresses kids out. Because I think as educators, sometimes, we forget that these kids are under a tremendous amount of pressure. They're feeling it. I think parents now are feeling it more than they've ever felt it. And so we started looking at what are the things that stress kids out most. And we know that that's amplified right now. And so we think it's even more relevant. So we started kind of trying to address like these fundamental issues that if we can answer these specific questions, we're going to alleviate stress, but also create a really good framework for developing our curriculum and our content. So I'll highlight those, and we're going to talk about each one of those in this session. We hope that this hits a note for you. We hope that if you have questions, you'll kind of throw these in there. But the fundamental 5 really are, what am I supposed to do? That's number 1. And when we first started talking about that, a lot of people at times said, well, that sounds so basic. Of course, people know what they're supposed to do. But when you talk to students, that's a big one. And right now, my guess is if you're a school principal or a teacher, your inbox is full of emails from parents saying, what am I supposed to do? How do I help my student? Or what is my child supposed to be doing right now? If we can answer that question, we're going to get a long way down the road. The second one is, when is it due? I have a daughter who just graduated high school last year. She's a college freshman. Due dates matter to her more than anything. She stresses and she worries, and she does all of those things are things that, late at night, worrying about when something is due. Is she getting it in on time? If we're not explicit about those things, it's a huge stressor for students. The third one is, how did I do? That's a big deal right now. How are we providing feedback to students while they're learning from home? I think that the challenge of providing feedback goes up a ton. If you're a Canvas user, it's built into the system, and there's opportunities for us to provide feedback to our students. Outside of that, we've got to be thinking outside the box. The fourth one is, can you help me? Can you help me? And right now, I think it's parents who are probably screaming the loudest around, can you help me, please? But as you start to kind of go down this list, what am I supposed to do? When is it due? How did I do? And can you help me? You can start to see that's a pretty good framework. And the last one is, what more can I do? And so that isn't necessarily meant to be like, hey, I'm a gifted child, give me more work so that I can advance above and beyond. We know a lot of states right now are saying, let's kind of put a halt on grading overall, but we want to make sure students are continuing to learn and to grow. So what more can we do? How can students show us in this time, with all of the challenges that we have in learning, what more can we do to show you that I get it outside of a worksheet or some packet? What are we doing outside the box to do that? So that's the fundamental 5. We're going to talk about those. And I think what you're going to see is we've got a college administrator here. We've got an elementary person, really. And we've got Cheryl, who covers the gamut in multiple districts. And we're seeing a lot of different things. So Todd, as we think about that first one, what am I supposed to do? What challenges are you guys seeing in your school? And how are you guys addressing that?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head that it's one thing for kids to know what they're supposed to do, but I think the biggest stressor right now is parents. This is all new for parents. And that finding one place for parents to find all the information is really important. So honestly, one thing that's come up a lot in our building with teachers is that you may think it's perfectly clear to you because you're working on one system or one platform or in one way. But a parent who has 3 kids, or let's say 2 in elementary and 1 in middle school, 1 in high school, or whatever that is, They're trying to find all of that information in 4 different places. It shows up differently. Even if you're all using the same platform, it shows up differently. And we're finding out that a more consistent approach would have been better. We're learning along the way. Like had we had all the time in the world to really think through this before it happened, it'd be different. But our teachers were really thrown into this and doing incredible work. But we're only now a couple weeks in realizing, dang it, if we would have set that up so that parents had that more consistent, it would have minimized some of those emails that we're getting. And I know teachers are getting emails till 11 o'clock at night and working more hours than they ever anticipated. I have to be honest, I think at first, several administrators were talking, we thought, what are teachers going to do this whole entire time when they provide instruction or whatever digitally, but then what are they going to do the whole rest of their day? We were totally unprepared for the amount of emails coming through to students and parents trying to figure it out. So that first thing is more key than I think people realize, making sure it's very clear.
Yeah, Cheryl, what about you? I mean, you really you've utilized Canvas as a massive resource for your teachers, but what's that been like for you guys?
So I work with a lot of districts and I've seen a lot of different things. And we've really honed into exactly what Todd is talking about. Like, how can we be consistent and how can we communicate? And really it's about giving us that same place to start every single time. And I feel like one of my districts is doing an awesome job. They have just created a really basic Google site and they've attached it to their website. And it's not fancy, but it's separated into elementary, middle, and high school. And there is a link to either that teacher is using a HyperDoc and they're communication preferences and what's going on in their classroom, or that might be linked to that teacher's Canvas page. But it is that central hub where people are able to springboard from and they're able to see what's going on in all of their kids' classes in one central spot. And I think Todd's exactly right. Like being consistent and finding that central hub has really proven to be key for a lot of our school districts.
How about you, Dean?
You know, as I take a look at what we're doing at the technical college system, one of the unique challenges we have is we service both secondary and adult students. And so when we're looking at, in terms of an adult student, how do we put a CDL program online? How do we put our nurses that we need in our hospitals through a program in a way that still meets all of the accreditation requirements that we have, but still give those students that are awaiting Carnegie credit and course credit at the high school level access and opportunity that they need to move forward with? And so I think the biggest challenge for us was, let's first of all focus on Maslow before we try to think about Bloom. What are the basic needs of our students? What are our Pell identified students dealing with? What are our veteran students dealing with? What are our most impacted students dealing with in terms of, can they even put school on their radar? If yes, what next steps can we put humanely in place to help continue their learning? And really, we're going student by student, case by case, trying to figure out what is the best approach for us to move forward. For some people, technology isn't going to be a problem. Our IT program, they're going to fly. For others that are in a true welding skill or they are in a construction and trades, they have trouble signing on to an email. And so I think defining literacy within the content area of technology itself has been important. Getting our teachers to put all that they can online on Canvas so there is a natural learning progression for them to take place. And at the end of the day, telling people it's okay to not be okay. This is the first pre-assessment that we've ever had as an educational system, as parents within the system, as students within the system. We've had a 3 to 4 week run in most cases where we've got some initial data. We know what's working. We know what's not. We're meeting every day to develop plans to best meet the needs of students. And following good models of schools, it's really targeted intervention for specific groups of students that are deficit in specific areas. So I think the biggest message I want to get across is there's no right or wrong way to do this. Just take good notes so we know the good things, and take good notes so we know the bad things.
I think that's one of the key things. As I started to reach out to administrators and said, just tell me what you're doing. I just want to hear what you're doing. The first response almost was this, like, I don't know if I want to tell you because I don't know what we're doing right now. And I don't want you to think that we don't know what we're doing, but we are scrambling and we're trying to do the best we can and we're learning as we go. And I think one of the values that I hope people take out of this is that we're all in this together. We're a community of educators. I see people sharing resources and supporting one another. across their districts, across states, just within the community of what it means to be an educator. But I also think it's really important from a leadership perspective to say this is our opportunity to lead, and make sure that our teachers are supported, that our students, I think what you said, Dean, is really important, that we're thinking about this in terms of, Maslow first, and I saw that a lot. I heard people say, we were just worried about making sure breakfast and lunch was getting out there. That was our priority one. And so I also think, I said this a lot early on as I talked to principals, I said, it felt to me like the initial response was one of a student coming up to a teacher's desk and saying, hey, we're driving to Florida, we're taking a 2-week vacation, can I get my homework? And now it's changed. I think we all have kind of had to come to grips with, not only is it not just a 2-week, give me my homework in a packet, we have a quarter left of the school year. And we have got to continue to evolve and support each other and grow and figure out how we make learning from home a value for these students, because we're losing a lot of the school year. So with that said, it also changes the dynamics of, we said the first thing is, what am I supposed to do? The next one is, when is it due? So what is that like for you, Cheryl? Are you guys putting due dates on things? Are you getting students turning things in? Are you treating it like business as usual? Or have you guys made accommodations for that?
So everybody is different. And I am back in the classroom as well. And, we went through a 2-week period of time where we were told enrichment, review. Our directive as of Thursday was, we are moving on. And I teach a dual credit class, so it's a little different than some of our other classes. We have school districts that are going full force and they are using due dates. They might have a grading plan in place, though, for how that's going to look. But kids need to know what their timeline is. They're trying to manage their time at home. I know my daughter has a whiteboard on her wall and she's trying to write everything up there and trying to keep track of it. And that's the beautiful thing about Canvas. If you're using Canvas as a tool, you have the ability to use due dates. But I always tell people too, use that homepage and not only put it on the calendar, but let them know up front when you give that assignment, when that assignment is due, so that they can see that all in one place. But it just depends on the district that you're at. In my classroom, yes, we have due dates. Are they hard and fast? No, because life is crazy right now. And I have students who are babysitting their little brothers and sisters, and they don't have time like we hope they would to maybe complete some of those things. So they're soft, but they are intended to give them some sort of a timeline for sure.
How about you, Todd?
Well, I was just going to piggyback off of that. We're in this time where flexibility is key, that we need to provide flexibility. But one thing we've talked to our teachers about, it's kind of like in the classroom with pacing, that we establish some sort of expected timeline. So yes, we will accept it whenever you can get it done. But in the classroom, you're constantly trying to pace so you can keep things up. And establishing a due date for students allows them to pace themselves and figure out how much time should this take. And it's really key for parents because they have no idea. And so it's helpful just to families for the first time now, a couple weeks in, some schools are just barely starting, are starting to realize we need to create a real schedule with this. And so those due dates help parents and families kind of outline what their days should look like and how much to get done. So it is key, and it really makes the students feel successful, like they're checking things off and getting it done and keeping up. I think for the long run, it'll make people feel like we're doing school right at home.
I want to hit on this question from Mick. It's a good one. Can you guys all see it?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a lot of what parents are actually feeling, right? Like it is the barrage. And I think that'll come as we talk a little bit more about the communication piece. But I think even in a way, everybody's trying to be super helpful. But if you have multiple students, or if you're a student in secondary schools or in college and you have multiple professors or multiple teachers sending you out content, I see my own daughter. She said it feels like in college, what the professors did was, we don't know what to do, so we're just going to throw a whole bunch of work and just do work and be busy. And I guess that's going to count for learning. What kind of recommendations do we give school leaders in terms of how should we be thinking about this as it relates to these parents who are not trained educators, who are probably trying to do their own job working from home, which is they're adapting and a little overwhelmed. And we're all cooped up together, and it's tough. What do you guys have to say to that?
Well, I think just to jump in, I think that in times of crisis, people's first response is, what about me? What about me? What about me?
Mhm.
And I know in a building with teachers, their first response was, I need my parents to feel like I've sent out stuff, that I'm doing stuff. So like you said at the very beginning, they sent out this list of things to do. It's only now as we go through that teachers are learning, parents are learning. So I guess I would say to parents, be patient. I know it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for teachers and students and parents and administrators and the whole entire world. We will learn from this. And I think for the first time, our teachers really are considering, wow, we do have families with 3 different kids and sharing. I mean, in some places, they're sharing one laptop for multiple children and trying to figure out just screen time. So this is something that if we patiently learn as we go, we will develop. But I think everyone is flexible. So as a parent, don't be afraid to voice that.
Mhm.
And teachers understand that you're going to get emails that sound hot because parents are frustrated and things, and it's not directed at you. We all just need to take a step back for a second and see how we can work together. But it's tough. This is a huge learning curve for all of us.
I love did you guys see what Marcus put up there? I absolutely love that grace plus clarity. Can
I pipe in for 1 second?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, that's kind of where we're at, this whole be kind movement, right? Like on my computer, it says be kind. And while all those things are happening, because I have kids upstairs e-learning myself right now, it would be really encouraging at this time to kind of voice that message, though. We have a lot of school left. There's a whole quarter left, right? And we want to make sure that there is a plan in place and that we are working the plan. And that might be a case where a leader doesn't know that's happening, because that's happening in our school buildings where everybody's doing their own thing and everybody's working in silos. And we really need to make sure that we're bringing that together to kind of come up with a plan. I saw a really great school here close by recently that had a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday schedule, and it was communicated to everyone. And these are the days that teacher will be working with your child and you will receive communication, and very laid out. And the plan was communicated and they were consistent. And so I think that would be super helpful to get some of that feedback for leaders as well.
Yeah. And I love what Jennifer just said there too. I know Jennifer's a world-class, brilliant educator who's done the distance learning thing. I think this is one of the hardest things. I've seen a lot of teachers say, I think it's important. I think, Todd, you even said this, that we do have some face-to-face time with our students, whether that's through, utilizing Canvas and the resources that we provide you to be able to do those conferencing type meetings, or, however else you figure it out. But I love what she said. It's not typical. We have to adjust. We have to think differently about the way we look at our classroom, which is why I think this conversation is so important, because what we're trying to say is it's not so much how you do it. It's, are we getting those right things in there that are going to help you address your student needs? What am I supposed to do? That's fundamental, whether you're face-to-face or not. When is it due? Again, not everybody's putting due dates on things, but if you are, be explicit. If we're not, you're going to get 5,000 emails from parents saying when and how, and all of those things. But the next one I think is really, really important is how did I do? That feedback loop is still really important. What are your thoughts on that, Dean?
Well, I believe feedback is of critical importance, and especially going back to Hattie, I mean, the number 2 thing we can do is get students to self-report their grades. And I hate to be the optimist in the midst of chaos, but what a better opportunity to provide students the skills necessary to be able to understand where they're at in their learning progression. What do they need to move forward? If they want to remediate, what steps do they need to take to move back and relearn some of those deficits that they may have in place? I really do view this as a huge opportunity to really challenge the traditional mindsets associated with education. And when we arrive on the other side of this, which we will arrive on the other side of this, we have a huge opportunity to have a focus on skill acquisition as opposed to point acquisition. The traditional mindset no longer applies in an ever-evolving world. And I hate to say that a pandemic took us to realize that, but in a lot of ways, when society in and of itself stops, but we still have an expectation of learning, we've got to be agile, we've got to be iterate, we've got to be willing to change what we do in terms of how we communicate. The most important thing with communication is there is a face behind every piece of data. Every one of those students still needs to feel as though they're the only person in the room, because that might be the only positive interaction they get with an adult that day. They may be placed in a totally alternative role where they're a primary caregiver as opposed to focusing on their own learning needs. I mean, I can't think of a 12-year-old student that said, we have, two other students in my house that I've got to take care of. So what I'm supposed to be learning in 6th and 7th grade, which is really foundational for high school, I've got to set that aside and focus on my own students. Or my own family. We have to acknowledge that learners are going to be all over the place on this, and we've got to communicate, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. The little things don't really matter. We're going to focus on the big things that we know have leverage and endurance, and we're going to help you set yourself up for the best opportunity for success. I think in the long run, that's the most humane way we can communicate with students at this point.
Cheryl, what are your thoughts? You're seeing it not just at one school, you're seeing it across multiple districts.
Yeah, and so I'm the Canvas person, right? And Canvas has amazing tools inside of it to communicate feedback. I'm encouraging a lot of my teachers to use, if those students have access to internet and they have access to technology, to use some of those features like the rubrics, but also use audio and video commenting and feedback. They want to see your face. So whether that's using your camera so that they can see you and hear you, because that is huge. But you know what? We're going old school too. I teach still, and I gave an assignment called Words of Affirmation, and I'm sending snail mail cards with my students' feedback. Like, here's her words of affirmation. And I want to make sure that I'm building relationships and kids know I care about them. So I think it's not just relying on technology, but making sure that we're using all of our tools in our toolbox.
I love that. I mean, Canvas is unbelievably powerful in being and allowing teachers to send video feedback, audio feedback. That is really powerful. Showing that little card made my heart go like this.
I'm hoping none of my kids are watching, because you're getting this like in 2 days. But
I think in this time, that is outside the box even, and thinking outside the box is really key. I want to hit, because we're running low on time, and I think this is really valuable. The big one that I think is important is really that fourth one, which is, can you help me? Right? Like, what are we doing right now to maintain those open lines of communication? And I like Jen's question of, what's one bit of, advice that you would give, or one idea that you could give that could really help people out? But how are we doing this piece of, how are we continuing to help our students? I almost think this is amplified, though, to our parents, because I've talked to numerous people who, through the course of a conversation, are like, hold on a second, my 8-year-old is screaming that, they don't want to get on the computer and do school right now. How are we maintaining those open lines of communication, Todd, in your school?
So, to Jen's comment about like, what's the one recommendation to administrators? This is honestly like the one thing that I've thought about for the past week is, our first thing is, what am I supposed to do? And when I'm going to get to number 4, but if you are not super clear and have a consistent way for parents to know what is my child supposed to do, or me as a student, what am I supposed to do, I guarantee you will be overwhelmed with the need to communicate back and forth to parents and students. And honestly, I know administrators out there that are listening understand, and they're feeling it from their teachers, that I cannot be answering emails every second of the day till 11 o'clock at night. I'm a mom, I have kids at home, so I'm trying to help teach. But that's the biggest thing is, yes, I think our parents, for the most part, I would think people know how to communicate with their teachers. It's how to streamline that's going to be the biggest ease for teachers. When we establish very clear expectations of what's expected, where do I find the materials, and when is it due, your need to communicate regularly with parents and students over the minutia will diminish, and it will allow you time to provide really good feedback, which to students says, I know you, I see you, and I'm going to help you.
Yeah. Dean, what about you?
In terms of getting all of this together, I want to piggyback on what Todd said. I know you, I see you, and we're going to help. We're going to help you. I mean, clarity in messaging right now is absolutely key. Creating a sense of calm, a sense of, we will get through this, and we will get through this together. I mean, that's ultimately what we have to deal with. I do this a lot. What's in our hands? What can we control? Our words, our messagings, and the way that we interact with one another are completely within our control. Let's focus on those variables, and the rest is going to fall into place. But with immediacy, let's be kind, let's be clear, and let's be collaborative. Those would be my 3 biggest takeaways for schools.
How about you, Cheryl, especially from the standpoint of, I think the Canvas environment, you've done some things as far as helping teachers set up their home pages and structuring things to try to build an environment where this is kind of key to the work that you're doing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was a Canvas trainer, and I've used Canvas as a teacher. I've used it as a curriculum director, and now I'm back in the classroom like 7 years later, right? And so I've seen lots of things, and I really discounted the importance of a homepage until I've gotten back in the classroom. And I have been working with my districts this week. I've actually created 5 custom templates just this week for my school districts because they're seeing the need to communicate more clearly and consistently. And so we are using that homepage at the very top to communicate preferences for teachers. Like, here's how you can communicate with me. These are the hours that I'm going to be available. And if you need to reach me after hours, I will get back to you at such and such a time. And they are being very explicit about how they want students to communicate with them. And that's really, helping some of what Todd was talking about with those emails, because I'm feeling it. Trust me, it's been a hectic 2 weeks. But then the second part of those templates that we've created is answering those questions, like the fundamental questions. What am I supposed to be doing today? What was the assignment? When is it due? And can you help me? If I need to reach you, can you help me? Almost everything we talked about today can be found in that homepage. And like I said before, I didn't think it was as important. I thought it was supposed to be fun and frilly. And now that we are in this situation, it is like, no, tell me what I need to do today. And so I am just really keep fine tuning it for my students and trying to, so that they don't have anxiety about those things, because they got a lot of other stuff to worry about right now. And I want to make sure that they understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing for me, but also how they can reach me if they need me. So yeah, I'm all about the homepage right now.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And whether that your homepage is a Canvas homepage, or I talked to a curriculum director who said, we're putting that all on our district website.
Yep.
We've kind of streamlined everything down, and we've got a grade level page. We know there's a million ways that people are trying to do this. If you're doing a packet pickup and drive through and you're handing out packets and things like that, because that's the best that you can do. I think if we're answering these fundamental questions, we get away from just putting together stuff for students to do, and we're thinking about making learning personal for these kids, for these families right now. The last one we have, we're just going to take just a second, because I think it's really important. When we talk about what more can we do, I think about this right now as, that initial 2-week packet that we gave out, it was like, just stay busy. Right now we're in the space of, we've got to think about the next 2 months, try to make school a real learning experience. What more can we do to, as far as students are concerned, to have them show us that they're learning? It doesn't have to be a worksheet or a packet. What are some of your guys' thoughts or ideas on best practices that way? Todd, let's start with you.
Well, I'm smiling because I know Sharon and I talked earlier about, teachers assigning things like make cupcakes for a science experiment, which is fun. And I get where they're going from, but I think we also need to consider materials and the mess it's making, and what we're expecting them to do at home is kind of tricky. So keep it simple and focused on what the skill is in standard. Have a natural tie-in. I mean, it's fine to put as options or different resources. Maybe you could do this or that, but to assign things that are going to create a burden on a family or just more stress and chaos. I mean, people have to be really mindful of that. But we want it to be very focused on what would a good activity be that would show you or demonstrate that skill or mastery of that skill. So just be mindful, I think, is my recommendation.
So no activities that involve toilet paper.
There you go. Yeah.
Regardless. Cheryl, how about you?
My daughters were actually, they're in agronomy class. We live in the middle of the Midwest. And my kids were given a long-term project to do some control experiment with seeds, which is great. My husband's a farmer. We have access to that. And that's great. But it ties directly into what they're learning. And so it's long-term, and it gives them ability to track and chart and, do some of those things. But it's a natural tie-in, like Todd said, right? Feels really good. It's easy for us to access those materials, but it might be difficult for somebody else to access those materials. So I think flexibility is key. So provide some of those opportunities for kids and maybe give them choice. Students love choice. So if we can give them a choice of doing this or that, that might be something as well. And by the way, the cupcakes were delicious.
I was going to say, just jumping off of that, we know this about kids. If a mom says, you know what, do something else, we don't have that right now. Kids' response is, but my teacher said I have to do that. So be mindful as we're preparing those things, that kids understand that choice and where the flexibility is, so that parents are armed with that as well.
You said something else too, Todd, that really resonated with me. And I think I've said it like 20 times. Keep it simple. I think there are all these resources being shared, which is awesome. But folks, if you haven't used that resource before with your kiddos and you're asking them to do 30 new things, that's going to overwhelm them as well. So try to get down to those tried and true, or maybe introduce one thing, but keep it simple, right? And we need to reduce the anxiety for those kids.
I love that. Dean, you've got 2 little girls at home too, so you're feeling it on both ends.
That I am. I get to experience what it's like to have third graders go through this, as well as students aged legitimately from 14 to 74. So I get a pretty wide view here. I think in terms of answering the last question, I think of it really in 3 phases, and we're dealing with a medical emergency, if you will. So I think of an EMT, an ER, and a long-term care physician in terms of what do we do next. In terms of the EMT, what are we doing right now in education? We're doing the best we can to keep students engaged in something meaningful. We're trying to keep them alive. That's what we're trying to do right now. As soon as we get to the ER, which may be in 3 or 4 weeks when we have a better idea and more data to determine what is the best course of action for the remainder of this year leading into the next, we're going to have a plan in place to take care of some of those critical needs and set them up for long-term success. But really, it's going to take that long-term care provider the ability to take a look at everything that's happened, diagram from point A to point B, what has occurred, and what are the longitudinal steps that we need to take to move forward. I really think in terms of what we do next, we absolutely respond with immediacy to the problem. We plan to remedy the best we can in an ER type setting with some additional resources. Again, piggybacking on what Cheryl said, nothing new that we're unfamiliar with. But then let's begin to think long term. What my daughters are responsible for in 3rd grade may come back to bite them as a junior when they're taking the ACT. These long-term gaps in student acquisition of knowledge are things that we've got to, as educational professionals, get past the immediacy of the problem and start to look long-term and say, what plans are we putting in place to ensure that our students are given the same access and opportunity regardless of what they faced in their educational career up until this point. So I really think in 3 phases of immediacy with the EMT, a stabilization in the ER, and a long-term care provider figuring out what we need to do longitudinally moving forward.
I think that's really important, Dean. I think we are at the beginning of what is going to be a very long road for us to figure out how this has impacted our students, our families, our teachers, and our administrators. I have not talked to an administrator who isn't just completely tapped right now. We know that the work that all of you who are school and district administrators, university administrators, people who are dealing on the front lines of communication and support and organization and dealing with everybody's stresses and anxiety, we know this is a tough time, but it is a long-term challenge that there's still a lot of time left in school. Our goal for this is to have this conversation so that we're expressing some of these ideas. And I think my big takeaways, I love the conversation around consistency. I don't think there's anything that would make me crazier as a parent than to have a student, more than one student, and the experience this one's having is wildly different than the one that this is having. Like, there needs to be some consistency because we have students who are at risk. All of our students are at risk at this point, of losing something, of missing something, and it creates opportunity for us as we're moving forward. I like that notion of keep it simple, keep it focused, intentional, appropriate, Tina. I think that's absolutely right as we're looking at these things. I also want to highlight a couple of other things. Cheryl, you have some resources for people if they're using Canvas. You've got some templates and things you want to just kind of throw that out there just so that people know where they can go to find some of those resources that you're providing folks in your own district?
Yeah. So my own district, they are sharing those in Canvas Commons in their own instance, so they have access to those. But I did create a generic template, kind of similar to what we've been using, called the CLL. I just said the Canvas for Leadership and Learning homepage template. You can just search my name, Cheryl Johnson, and it will come up. But just to give, if anybody's out there and like, I never thought of using a homepage before, I would highly encourage you, if you use Canvas, that would be a great resource for you.
Yeah, and obviously the community, the Commons is huge right now in terms of helping to provide resources, especially for those people who are new to the community. So we appreciate that. The other thing is this is our first in a series of webinars that we're going to do. This one was really focused on communication around a common framework. I'm just going to review that framework again. Hopefully that resonates with you as you're thinking about how you structure things. Are we addressing those key questions that create the most stress and anxiety for students and parents, and I think teachers right now? Are we answering the question of, what am I supposed to do? When is it due? How did I do? Can you help me? And what more can I do? If we can keep that common framework together, that's the consistency. I know when Todd and I talked about this the other day, Todd was like, I just need to sit down with my teachers and just review with my teachers those very simple, basic things. And it goes back to, I think, a lot of where Dean's coming from. If we're thinking about those questions in that framework, we're thinking about our kids, their social and emotional well-being. When we answer those questions, when we're clear and explicit, it doesn't mean when we say, when is it due, that you have to put due dates on things. The kids have to turn things in, because every district, every school is learning to deal with this based on the challenges that they face in their own districts. Some of you are lucky enough to be in areas where kids have great access to technology and those types of resources. And some of you are in places where that's just outside the realm of possibility. And I think the framework is kind of the foundation that's going to help us move forward. So we're going to do a few more webinars. Some of these folks will be on the webinar. We'll also bring in other leaders from around the country to share with us what they're doing. With that, I want to thank all three of you for joining us. I think it's been really interesting. And I want to thank everybody who joined us on for this webinar. Hopefully you find this helpful. And hopefully you'll join us again as we pull up our next webinar.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.